It's one of the biggest questions we have about ourselves. For millions of years, our ancestors were busy. They were busy not getting eaten, they were busy finding food, they were busy making sharp rocks to cut things and round rocks to smash things. Their lives were about survival, pure and simple, and then something changed. We started drawing, we started carving, we started stringing shells together to wear around our necks. We started making art. And it doesn't just appear slowly, like a tool getting a little better over 1,000 years. In the grand scheme of human evolution, it feels like it explodes out of nowhere. One moment, we're just clever apes making tools. The next, we're standing in a deep, dark cave, painting breathtaking images of lions and horses on the walls by the light of a flickering torch. Why? Why waste the time? Why use precious resources like animal fat for lamps and colored minerals for paint on something that doesn't fill your stomach or protect you from a saber-toothed cat? It seems frivolous. It seems like a distraction from the serious business of staying alive. But it wasn't a distraction. It was maybe the most important thing we ever did. Because starting to make art wasn't just about making pretty pictures. It was a sign that something profound had changed inside our heads. We had started to think differently. The classic story you might have heard is about the creative explosion in Europe. Around 40,000 years ago, Homo sapiens, our species, arrived in Europe, and suddenly the archaeological record is filled with amazing things. We find the stunning cave paintings of Chauvet and Lascaux in France and Altamira in Spain. We find intricately carved figurines like the Venus of Willendorf or the incredible Lion Man of Hohenstein-Stadel, a human body with the head of a lion carved from a mammoth tusk. It's an idea, a myth, given physical form. This is not a tool. It's something else entirely. For a long time, scientists thought this was it. This was the moment. The switch flipped in the human brain, and art was born. Maybe a genetic mutation gave us a final cognitive boost. Maybe it was the challenge of a new, colder environment in Europe that forced us to innovate. The art was so good, so sudden, it looked like a revolution. The horses in Chauvet Cave have shading. They have perspective, they look like they could run right off the rock wall. This wasn't primitive doodling, this was the work of masters. So for decades, the story was simple, humans got smart, went to Europe, and started making art. But that story's too simple, and it's probably wrong. Over the last few decades, archaeologists have been digging deeper, especially in Africa, where our species originated. And they found something that changed everything. At a place called Blombos Cave in South Africa, they found pieces of ochre, a red mineral pigment. These pieces weren't just lying there, they had been intentionally marked. One piece, dated to around 77,000 years ago, has a clear cross-hatch pattern scratched into its surface. It's a design, it's abstract, it doesn't look like an animal or a person. It's a pattern made for a reason. This was huge. This was nearly twice as old as the European cave art. In the same cave, they found tiny shells, all from the same species of sea snail. Each one had a small hole punched in it, in exactly the same spot. These weren't random. They were beads, they were meant to be strung together and worn. This is personal adornment. This is a statement. It's saying, I am part of this group, or I am this kind of person. This is symbolism, plain and simple, from 100,000 years ago. This evidence tells us that the explosion wasn't really an explosion. It was more like a long, slow-burning fire that had been smoldering in Africa for tens of thousands of years before it burst into flame in the caves of Europe. The capacity for art, the need for it, was already there. It didn't just appear. So the question changes. It's not, why did art suddenly appear? It's, what changed in us that made it possible and then necessary? The answer has to be in our minds. The thing that separates us from every other animal is our ability for abstract, symbolic thought. A dog knows that the sound of a can opener means food. That's a direct association. But a human can see a drawing of a bison and understand it represents a real bison that isn't there. We can talk about yesterday, we can plan for next week, we can invent gods and create laws. We live in a world of ideas, not just a world of things. Art is the physical evidence of that kind of mind. Well, you can't carve a Lion Man figurine unless you can first hold the idea of a Lion Man in your head. It's an act of imagination. You can't paint a herd of horses on a cave wall unless you can remember what they looked like, and then translate that memory into a series of lines and colors. This ability, what scientists call cognitive fluidity, is the foundation for everything. It's the ability to link different concepts together. My memory of a horse plus my skill with a tool plus this red rock Aya painting. The same mental hardware is what you need for complex language, for long-term planning, and for creating complex social rules. Art wasn't a separate skill. It was part of a package deal of being a modern human. So we had the brain for it, but that still doesn't explain the why. What was the evolutionary pressure? What problem did making art solve that helped us survive and reproduce? There isn't one simple answer. There are several powerful theories, and the truth is probably a mix of all of them. One of the biggest ideas is that art was a form of social glue. As human groups got bigger, it became harder to keep everyone on the same page. In a small group of 20 people, you know everyone. You know who's a good hunter, who's lazy, who you can trust. But what about a group of 150? You can't maintain personal relationships with everyone. You need something more. You need a shared identity. Think of those shell beads from Blombo's cave. If everyone in your group wears the same kind of necklace, you can instantly tell who is us and who is them. It's like a uniform or a team jersey. It builds cohesion. The paintings in a cave could serve the same purpose. They might depict the origin story of the clan, the great deeds of ancestors, or the sacred animals of the territory. Going into the cave to see the paintings could have been a powerful ritual, a ceremony that bound the group together and reinforced their shared beliefs and values. In a world of scarce resources and competing groups, having a strong, cooperative tribe was a massive survival advantage. And art helped create that tribe. It gave a physical form to a shared identity. Another powerful theory connects art with religion and shamanism. For many traditional societies, the world is not just a physical place. There are spirits, there are other realms, and certain people, shamans, can travel between these worlds. The caves themselves might have been seen as portals. Think about what it's like to go deep into a cave. It's a completely different world. It's dark, silent, except for the dripping of water and disorienting. The air is different. Sounds echo strangely. Under the influence of sensory deprivation or maybe even hallucinogenic plants, a person's mind can start to play tricks. The natural bumps and cracks in the cave wall start to look like the hump of a bison or the leg of a horse. The theory is that the shamans would go into these trances, see the spirit animals in the rock, and then simply trace or elaborate on what was already there. The art wasn't about decorating a living room, it was about making contact with the spirit world. Why? Maybe for hunting magic. The idea was that by capturing the image of an animal, you gain some power over its spirit. This would ensure a successful hunt. This might explain why so many of the animals are shown with spears or arrows in them. It wasn't a record of a past hunt, it was a ritual to ensure a future one. It was a way of imposing some control, some predictability on a very dangerous and uncertain world. In a life that depended on the success of the next hunt, anything that boosted the group's confidence and focus would be incredibly valuable. But maybe the purpose was more practical. Forget the spirit world for a moment. Think of art as information storage. These people had no writing. How do you pass down crucial knowledge from one generation to the next? You tell stories, but stories can change. They can be forgotten. Art is more permanent. A painting of a herd of deer in autumn might be a way to teach young hunters when and where to find them. A series of tracks painted next to an animal could be an identification guide. The complex panels with many different animals interacting could have been mnemonic devices, visual aids for storytellers reciting the great myths and histories of the people. They were a prehistoric encyclopedia, a library on the rocks. They stored the accumulated wisdom of the group in a form that everyone could see and understand. This knowledge was essential for survival, and art was the technology they used to preserve it. Then there's a more provocative idea, one drawn directly from evolutionary theory sexual selection. Think of a peacock's tail. That massive, colorful tail is a huge liability. It's heavy, it makes it hard to fly, and it's like a giant neon sign for predators. From a pure survival standpoint, it's a terrible idea, so why does it exist? Because peahens find it attractive. A male peacock that can grow such a magnificent tail and still survive is demonstrating its genetic fitness. It's an honest signal that says, I have such good genes, I am so healthy and strong, that I can afford to waste resources on this ridiculous, beautiful thing. Could art have been our peacock's tail? Making art is difficult. It takes time, skill, and intelligence. It requires fine motor control and the ability to think symbolically. It also means you're good enough at surviving that you have leisure time. You're not spending every waking moment desperately searching for food. So an individual who could create beautiful carvings or stunning paintings was advertising their good genes. They were demonstrating their cleverness, their resourcefulness, and their dexterity. These are all highly desirable traits in a potential mate. Perhaps the best artists got more partners and had more children, passing on the genes for both artistic ability and the appreciation of it. And art wasn't just about survival, it was about seduction. Finally, there's a more philosophical possibility. Maybe art wasn't an adaptation for anything specific. Maybe it was just an unavoidable byproduct of having a big, complex brain. This is sometimes called the spandrel theory. In architecture, a spandrel is the triangular space that's created when you put a round dome on top of a square room. The spandrels weren't the point of the design, they are just a necessary consequence of putting a circle and a square together. But once they exist, they become a perfect place to put a beautiful mosaic or a painting. Perhaps the human brain is like that. We evolved big brains for very practical reasons to make better tools to navigate complex social groups, to use language. But a side effect of all that new neural wiring was consciousness, imagination, and a sense of aesthetics. We just started seeing patterns in the world. We started appreciating beauty. We had this amazing new mental hardware, and it started doing things it wasn't designed for. We started making music, telling elaborate stories, and making images simply because we could. Well, art wasn't a tool to solve a problem. It was the brain playing. It was the mind waking up and looking at the world and itself for the very first time. And what about our cousins, the Neanderthals? For a long time, we defined ourselves, Homo sapiens, as the only artistic, symbolic humans. Neanderthals were portrayed as brutish and unintelligent, but that view is crumbling. We now have evidence that Neanderthals used pigments like ochre. They collected eagle talons and feathers, likely for personal adornment. And in a cave in Spain, there are red paintings on the wall, simple lines, dots, and a ladder-like shape that have been dated to 65,000 years ago. That's 20,000 years before Homo sapiens are thought to have arrived in that region. If that date is correct, the artists had to be Neanderthals. This is revolutionary. It means that the capacity for symbolic thought, the root of all art, wasn't unique to our lineage. It's a deeper human trait, one we share with our ancient relatives. Perhaps the cognitive seeds were planted much earlier in our common ancestor, and they just flowered in different ways in different populations. Our art became more elaborate and figurative, while theirs remained more abstract. But the impulse was the same. The need to make a mark, to impose meaning on the world, was a shared human journey. So why did we start making art? There is no single, simple answer. It wasn't just one thing. It was a convergence. We developed the cognitive machinery for symbolic thought. Our social lives became more complex, requiring new ways to bond groups together. We developed a spiritual awareness, a need to connect with forces beyond the visible world. We needed to store and transmit a growing body of knowledge, and we needed to show off to each other to find the best mates. And art was the perfect solution to all of these problems. It was a multi-tool. It strengthened the tribe's identity. It served as a gateway to the spirit world. It was a library of survival knowledge, and it was a signal of individual fitness. It was all of these things at once, but maybe the deepest reason is the simplest one. Look at the hand stencils that appear in caves all over the world. An artist would place their hand on the rock wall and blow pigment over it, leaving a negative outline. It's one of the most common and most powerful images from our deep past. It's not a story. It's not a symbol of a hunt. It's a signature. It's a person, tens of thousands of years ago, reaching across time to say something incredibly simple and profoundly human: I was here. In a short, brutal life where you and everyone you knew would be gone and forgotten in a flash, making art was a grasp for permanence. It was a way to take the fleeting thoughts, stories, and visions from inside your mind and make them real in the outside world. To fix them in stone, it was a rebellion against the temporary nature of existence. It was the moment we stopped just living in the world and started trying to make sense of it and our place within it. We started making art when we became fully, consciously, and sometimes painfully human. And we've never stopped.